Hi, I'm Danny Hagen, and I'm here to show you that the organic label might not exactly be what you think it is, and why is it more important to truly eat locally. The Canadian organic industry is something that has blown up this past decade. People seem to be a lot more concerned with what they're eating these days than what seemed to be 20 years ago, 10 years, or even 5 years ago. There's nothing wrong with being concerned about what you're eating and eating healthy. People should be eating healthy, but probably more in the sense of ordering a salad as opposed to a burger, or a side of vegetables as opposed to a side of fries. What I would like to discuss is people thinking that a tomato is less nutritious because it's conventionally grown and not organic, and it only costs $1.99 a pound instead of $4.99 a pound. There's a fad going across the nation that is saying if you aren't eating organic, you're not eating healthy. What I would like to discuss here is don't eat it because it says organic. Eat it because you know what it is. The first thing we need to understand in the industry is the governing bodies. How is it certified in both Canada and the US? And then if it's not from Canada, US, where does it come from? The Canadian and US both have two different governing bodies. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency and the United States Department of Agriculture. There are two ways, now among them, there are two ways that items can be considered organic. Individual items and multi-ingredient items. So an individual item would be something like an apple. Now it has to be what's considered 95% organic to be considered organic and have that sticker on it. So what that means is you look at an apple, 5% of it is allowed to be covered in herb and pesticide and any other type of chemical that can go on in the growing process, in the cleaning process, anything, preservation, anything. So 5% can still be covered in chemical, but you're buying it thinking there's zero chemical on it. Now for multi-ingredient items, take a loaf of bread for example, 70% has to be organic for it to be considered organic. So take 10 ingredients, 7 of them have to be organic for the product to be an organic loaf of bread. So it could still have 30% of items covered in chemical. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency is simply the governing body, as is the USDA. In Canada here, there's 8 different certifying companies that do the work for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So what happens is they go on behalf of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to the farms and say, yes, you're certified organic, or no, change this. So once they approve a farm and the paperwork is filed, these companies approve them, the farmer is allowed to label their produce organic. And once certification is approved, the certifying company will then receive a 1 to 3% gross revenue on that farmer's product. The organic industry in Canada is almost $3 billion. So that's almost $90 million paid out in royalties to these 8 companies. Each company is required to do their own audits every 1 to 3 years, depending on the type of farm it is. I know from personal experience that these audits sometimes are just a phone call or a letter, and it's rarely do they show up on the farm to test soil, test your product. So it's basically all on the honor system. And these companies are very unmotivated for farmers to lose their certification, because they'll lose that royalty check and that percentage of that 90 million that is owed to them. Also, when it comes to certifying the farms, generally speaking, just the very, very basic standards are met, because they want to give certification fast to start collecting that 1 to 3% gross revenue royalty. So if these are the standards for Canada and the US, what about other countries? Where does the rest of our food, organic food, come from? Canada brings in approximately 80% of its organic product. And within that 80%, about half of that is from the US, and the remainder is from South America and Mexico. So we know the standards for Canada and the US are pretty similar, but that remaining 40% of the total is from countries like Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela, Costa Rica, and Mexico. These governments don't exactly have the growing standards that we do, and when it comes to organic, it's even less. Like here in Canada, they have a government body looking over the organic industry, and with the reputation that their governments have, and once it's realized the premium that Canadians and Americans will pay for organic produce, do you really think that they are going to go to the lengths to truly grow organic? They're going to slap the label on it and send it off as fast as possible to collect that premium. So, if the organic standards are not what we think it is, where do we eat? Where should we get our food? That's simple. Eat locally. Get to know your farmer. If you don't know a farmer, you can Google CSA programs, which are community shared agriculture, and you can buy a share of the crop from that year. Vegetables, fruits, grains, whatever you like. If you don't want to buy into a CSA, because of the new labeling laws in Canada, you can just look in the grocery store. What's Alberta grown, BC grown, Saskatchewan, Ontario, anywhere grown, even in the US. It'll have to say on it, where is it grown? So, as you can tell, there are many different sources of food. Knowing exactly how it is grown has made a huge factor to eating better. Once you know these farmers, you can talk to them. Do they use herbicides? Do they use pesticides? How do they grow it? That is the only way you can ensure that you are eating zero chemical. Knowing your food is knowing your farmer, and knowing your farmer is truly knowing your food.